Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She smirked, tilted her head, and said to her friend over wine, "He's basically my ex. He just pays the bills." That sentence cut deeper than any betrayal I'd imagined. Not because of the words, but because of how casually she said them, like I wasn't even a person, just a paycheck with a heartbeat. Her name was Lauren. We'd been married 8 years, and in that instant, she stripped it all down to a cruel joke. I stood in the kitchen doorway, half hidden, my hands still wet from washing dishes, hearing her reduce me to nothing. I didn't storm in. I didn't shout. I didn't even demand an explanation. My silence was louder than any fight could have been. She turned her head, spotted me, and instead of looking guilty, she smiled like she'd been waiting for me to hear. That smirk was her weapon, but she didn't realize it had just backfired. I walked past her, calm, deliberate. She expected anger. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened our joint account, and within seconds transferred half into a private one. No warnings. No words. Just action. She asked if I was okay, feigning concern, but her eyes still glittered with mockery. I met her gaze and said 6 words that shifted the air in the room. Benefits canceled. Get out. Now. For the first time in years, she froze. No witty comeback. No sarcastic smile. Just silence. She thought she had me pinned, her safe provider, her background noise, her safety net. But in that moment, she saw something different. She saw a man who had already let go. I went upstairs, pulled out a suitcase, and began packing. Not mine, hers. She followed me, her voice shaking, suddenly softer, asking me to talk, to calm down. But I didn't break stride. Every shirt folded was a reminder that she'd mistaken my loyalty for weakness. Every dress I laid in that case was proof that I was done orbiting around her contempt. By midnight, the locks were changed. By morning, her credit cards were cut off. She tried calling her sister, her mother, anyone who'd listen, painting me as irrational. But I had screenshots, bank records, even her own smug texts to friends where she bragged about using me. Her words were about to unravel her carefully curated facade. And here's the part she never saw coming. I wasn't just walking away. I was dismantling every illusion she thought she controlled. Quietly, methodically, with the same precision she thought she had over me. When I left for work the next day, she wasn't in the house. Her suitcase was gone, but her perfume still lingered in the hallway. I locked the door behind me and felt something I hadn't in years, clarity. That night, her best friend sent me a message. Not out of pity, out of guilt. She knew more than I did, and her first words confirmed it. "I think you should see this." Her best friend's message sat on my screen, glowing like a warning flare in the dark. I opened it, expecting pity or maybe some vague attempt at comfort. Instead, it was a screenshot. A text thread. Lauren's words, raw and unfiltered. She hadn't just mocked me once over wine. She'd been ridiculing me for months behind my back. "He thinks he's the provider, but really he's just my safety net. Once I'm done stacking what I need, I'll be gone." The words landed like blows, but not the kind that broke me. They clarified everything. She hadn't stumbled into arrogance one night. This had been her plan, her private performance to an audience I didn't even know existed. Friends who laughed along. Friends who encouraged her. I stared at the thread until the letters blurred, then scrolled down. There it was, another message. Not just mockery this time. A photo. Her, smiling at a restaurant, wine glass raised. And next to her, a man I didn't recognize. I didn't call her out. I didn't drive to find them. That's what she would expect. Rage, confrontation, a scene. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, the glow of my phone lighting up the emptiness of the house. I was already ahead of her. The finances were sealed. Her access was gone. The locks had been changed. And now I had evidence. Evidence that would matter when it counted. The silence I built around her wasn't just absence. It was strategy. Each day I left earlier, came home later. My phone stayed cold, my replies to her rare and precise. When she tried to text about picking up her things, I answered with one line. Already outside in the garage. No warmth. No anger. Just logistics. She showed up once, her makeup layered on like armor, but her eyes darted around nervously, searching for something in my face. I gave her nothing. She packed the boxes into her car in silence, while I stood in the doorway drinking coffee. as if she were a moving company I'd hired. But the cracks were starting to show. I could see it in the way she lingered, pretending to check a bag twice. In the way her hand trembled when she signed her name on the storage receipt I handed her. She thought she had been in control, playing some grand game. Now, with every quiet step I took, she was losing ground she didn't even realize was fragile. That night, her friend sent me another message. This time it wasn't a screenshot. It was a confession. She wrote, "She's been seeing him for months. I thought you should know before she spins it on you." I stared at the words, calm, detached. I didn't need to storm her world. I just needed to keep building mine. And the cruel irony was, the more silent I became, the louder her mistakes were echoing. The confession sat in my inbox like a blade left on the table, gleaming under the light. Her best friend hadn't just hinted, she had spelled it out. Lauren wasn't mocking me in private for fun. She was building a new life, rehearsing her exit while feeding on mine. The man in the photo wasn't a stranger anymore. He was the answer to the months of coldness, the late nights, the empty excuses. I didn't react. That's what struck me most. A year ago, this revelation would have shattered me. I would have demanded names, dates, details. Now, it was just confirmation of what I had already begun to suspect. And confirmation meant freedom. Because once the truth is stripped bare, there's no reason left to chase ghosts. I kept my silence intact, stronger than steel. At work, I poured myself into projects that had sat untouched for years. I signed up for evening classes, pushed myself harder in the gym, started reconnecting with people I hadn't seen in ages. Every hour I wasn't near her was an hour I was reclaiming. The strange thing? I didn't miss her. I missed who she used to be, but that woman was long gone, buried under layers of disdain and duplicity. She noticed, though? Of course she did. My absence wasn't the kind she could spin. She showed up at my office one afternoon, unannounced. She looked polished, rehearsed, but her eyes betrayed her. She asked if we could talk, her voice soft, almost sweet. I let her sit across from me in the lobby while I finished a call, deliberately making her wait. When I finally looked up, I didn't offer comfort or curiosity. I asked her if she needed anything business-related. Her face faltered for a second before she tried to recover, saying she just wanted to clear the air. I nodded, told her there was nothing left to clear, and walked back to my office. That night, another message came from her friend. This time, a short video clip. Grainy, shaky, but enough. Lauren and him, leaning close at a bar, his hand on the small of her back, her laughter cutting through the noise. Not a rumor. Not speculation. Evidence. I didn't forward it to family. I didn't call her out. I filed it. Quietly. A man doesn't need to shout when the truth is already screaming louder than any argument could. And as I watched that clip once more before locking my phone, a calm settled over me. The kind of calm that only comes when the last piece of the puzzle fits. She thought she'd been writing the story of my downfall. What she didn't realize was that I was already crafting the ending, and it wouldn't be hers to control. The video played over in my mind, not as torment, but as strategy. Every frame of her leaning in closer, every flicker of her smile at a man who wasn't me, it all became ammunition. I didn't need to confront her with it yet. Timing was everything. Silence was my ally. Let her think the distance was indifference. Let her believe she still had the upper hand. The truth was, every move she made only tightened the net I was weaving. I began preparing in ways she couldn't see. At night, when the house was finally empty of her perfume and her footsteps, I reviewed documents, lined up accounts, and secured every loose end she had once leaned on me to handle. The joint credit cards she once used freely were now frozen. The safety she assumed permanent was evaporating with each passing day. If she noticed, she didn't show it. Or maybe she thought her charm could win it back when she needed to. But then came the first crack in her confidence. One evening, as I was leaving the gym, my phone lit up with her name. For the first time in weeks, I answered. Her voice was strained, stripped of the arrogance I had grown used to. She said something about her car breaking down, about needing help. I let the silence hang for a long second, then told her roadside assistance was included with the insurance. She muttered something I couldn't quite catch, but the frustration was clear. She wasn't used to me refusing to step in. That was her first taste of what independence without me truly meant. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just drove home, showered, and slept soundly. The next morning, I found another message waiting for me, again from her friend. This one was different. A voice memo. Hesitant, whispered. She said she couldn't keep covering for Lauren, that the lies had gone too far, and that I deserved to know what was coming next. The words tightened my focus. Lauren wasn't just careless. She was planning something bigger. I played that memo twice, then set my phone down and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about erasure. She wanted to rewrite the story so I'd be the villain, the failure, the man who pushed her into someone else's arms. She thought she was setting the stage for her clean exit. But what she never accounted for was the fact that silence, when sharpened, cuts cleaner than any confrontation. And as she kept playing her game, I was already shaping the ending, one she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The voice memo replayed in my head all morning. Her friend had said Lauren was planning something, and the way she whispered it made it sound less like gossip and more like a warning. I didn't press for details. I didn't reply at all. Sometimes silence compels people to reveal more than questions ever could. That night, Lauren showed up at the house. Not to collect more boxes, not to argue. She came dressed sharp, perfume heavy, with a smile too polished to be real. She walked through the door like she still owned the air inside, asking if we could sit and talk. I didn't offer her a seat. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, letting her fill the space with nervous chatter. She said she missed the way things used to be. She said she thought maybe we could start fresh, that she'd been confused, under stress. I listened, expression blank, giving her nothing. She was fishing for my reaction, trying to measure if her old strings could still move me. When I finally spoke, it was a single line. Confused doesn't look like what I've seen. The words hit her harder than a scream. Her eyes flickered, searching. Then she tried to recover, asking what I meant. I didn't answer. I just picked up my keys, walked past her, and left her standing in the kitchen. I drove with no destination, just silence and the open road. By the time I came back, her car was gone. On the table sat a folded note. She'd written that she only wanted to make things right, that I was pushing her away. But the ink was smudged, like the pen had hesitated, like even she didn't believe her own words. 2 days later, her friend messaged again. This time, it was direct. She said Lauren wasn't trying to save the marriage. She was trying to set up a story where I was the distant husband, the cold one, the man who made her feel unwanted. She wanted sympathy. She wanted to walk away clean while I carried the weight of blame. I didn't panic. I didn't chase. I simply adjusted. Screenshots, receipts, timelines, all quietly organized. The same patience she mistook for weakness was now precision. She was setting her narrative, but I was already writing mine. The balance had shifted. She just hadn't realized it yet. Because for the first time, her smirk wasn't power. It was desperation, dressed up as control. And while she scrambled to paint me as the villain, I was preparing to disappear in a way that would leave her staring into silence, with nothing left to hold on to. The more she tried to spin her story, the quieter I became. I didn't respond to her notes, her messages, or her sudden attempts at warmth. Silence was the mirror I held up, and she was starting to hate what stared back. I knew her patterns well enough to predict the next move. When charm failed, she would pivot to anger. And sure enough, it came. Late one evening, she appeared at my door again. But this time, there was no soft smile. Her voice was sharp, demanding. She accused me of being childish, of avoiding responsibility, of ruining our marriage. She said I was cruel for cutting her off financially, that I was abandoning her after everything we'd built. I let her words hang in the air, then told her calmly that choices have consequences. Her face tightened, but I didn't raise my tone. I didn't need to. She had grown used to me defending myself, to me explaining. Now, there was nothing but cold finality. She stormed out, but her rage wasn't what rattled me. What struck me was the flicker of fear I caught in her eyes before she turned away. For the first time, she seemed unsure. The arrogance she wore so easily was cracking. And fear, once it enters, only spreads. The next day, I had lunch with a colleague who had no idea about the turmoil at home. We talked business, future plans, new projects. As I spoke, I realized something. I wasn't pretending. I was moving forward. Life outside of her shadow was beginning to take shape, and it felt natural, almost overdue. The weight she'd pressed on me for years was lifting, piece by piece. That evening, another message came from her friend. This one was longer, a string of texts spilling out guilt and frustration. She said she couldn't stand by while Lauren kept lying. She revealed the man's name, the places they had met, even the dates. It was a roadmap of betrayal laid out in black and white. I saved every word, but I didn't confront Lauren with it. She was expecting fireworks, expecting me to explode and prove her story right. Instead, I filed it quietly, one more piece in the structure I was building. That night, I poured a drink, sat on the back porch, and watched the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in years, I wasn't consumed by her. I wasn't waiting for her approval, her attention, her scraps of affection. I was simply existing, and it felt more powerful than anything she could offer. Lauren thought she was scripting her grand escape. What she didn't see was that the exit door had already closed behind her. She wasn't leaving me. I had already left her, and all that remained was for the world to catch up to the truth. By the time the weeks passed, her story had started leaking beyond closed doors. Friends, relatives, even coworkers were hearing fragments of her version. She painted me as the cold husband who shut her out, the man who cared more about his bank account than his wife. What she didn't realize was that people were also watching her, noticing the inconsistencies, the sudden changes in her lifestyle, the way her social media posts didn't quite match the image she was selling. The whispers were beginning to shift, and not in her favor. I didn't defend myself. I didn't rush to explain to anyone. I knew silence would do the work for me, because while she scrambled to control the narrative, I held the proof. Screenshots, receipts, messages. Every smug line she had thrown at her friends now sat in a folder under her own name. I didn't need to broadcast it. I just needed to wait. One afternoon, I got a call from her mother. Her voice was sharp, demanding answers. She asked why Lauren had been saying I'd abandoned her, why she was suddenly struggling financially, why I was being so cold. I let her speak, then told her calmly that I respected her as family, but I wouldn't discuss private matters over the phone. She grew frustrated, but I stayed steady. No excuses, no explanations. The truth would surface on its own. That same evening, Lauren texted me. Not angry this time, desperate. She wrote that she missed me, that things had gotten out of control, that she just wanted to come home and make it right. I stared at the message for a long while before replying with 2 words, too late. Nothing more. I knew those words would land like a hammer. And they did. Minutes later, another stream of messages came in. Please, half apologies, promises to change. But behind the sudden remorse, I could feel the fear. She wasn't losing me. She had already lost me. What terrified her was that I wasn't fighting for her anymore. Her friend reached out again the next day, this time almost panicked. She said Lauren was unraveling, that the man she thought was her escape wasn't who she believed he was. Apparently, he had his own secrets, debts, a history of failed relationships, a reputation for using people until they had nothing left. Suddenly, Lauren wasn't the one pulling strings. She was the one being pulled. I read every word, but I didn't feel satisfaction. Just clarity. The woman who once smirked at me like I was nothing more than a paycheck was now standing in the wreckage of her own choices. And as her carefully constructed world began to collapse, I realized I didn't have to do a thing. Her downfall had already begun, and all I needed to do was step aside and let gravity finish the work. Her downfall didn't arrive with an explosion. It came in whispers, in small humiliations she couldn't control. The first hint was when her social circle began shrinking. People who once laughed at her jokes now kept their distance. Invitations dried up. Posts she made online got fewer likes, fewer comments. The cracks in her image were visible, and those who had fed off her arrogance no longer wanted to be attached to it. Meanwhile, I kept moving forward. My life wasn't centered on her anymore. I poured my energy into my work, my body, my mind. The silence that once suffocated me had become my sanctuary. I woke up each day with a sharper focus, a clearer sense of purpose. Even the way I carried myself began to change. And people noticed. Colleagues, acquaintances, even strangers. They saw strength where she had only seen a paycheck. Then came the call I had been expecting. This time, it wasn't her mother. It was Lauren herself. Her voice shook, her tone unrecognizable. She said she'd made a mistake. She said the man she thought was her future had already pulled away, leaving her stranded with nothing but empty promises. She asked if we could meet, just to talk. I listened quietly, then ended the call without a word. That silence was my answer. It was final, undeniable. She had spent months turning her back on me, mocking me, reducing me to a role she thought she could replace. And now, when the illusion shattered, she reached for the same hand she once brushed away. But it wasn't there anymore. I had withdrawn it long before she realized she might need it again. Her friend confirmed what I already suspected. Lauren had been left behind, not by me, but by the very man she risked everything for. She was scrambling now, trying to patch together a life she'd burned with her own arrogance. She was calling people, asking for help, leaning on family she had once dismissed. And with each attempt, the silence grew louder. The world wasn't answering her the way it once did. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate her collapse. I simply observed, a quiet witness to the consequences she created for herself. I had already stepped out of her orbit, already cut every thread she thought bound me to her. Now, she was spinning alone, dizzy in the emptiness she once tried to trap me in. As I sat alone that evening, watching the city fade into night, I felt nothing for her anymore. No anger, no sadness, just the clean edge of detachment. She thought she could smirk her way through betrayal, that she could reduce me to a wallet and a roof. But now, she was left with nothing but silence, and it was hers to live in. The silence between us had become permanent, but Lauren still tried to pierce it. She showed up at my office one afternoon without warning. The receptionist called to say my wife was waiting, but I corrected her. Ex-wife, I said flatly, before stepping out to face the woman who had once called me her partner. She looked different. Not polished this time, not untouchable. There were dark circles under her eyes, her posture uncertain. She started speaking quickly, almost stumbling over her words. She said she knew she'd gone too far, that she'd been stupid, that she missed me. She even said she was willing to do anything to make things right. I let her talk. I gave her all the rope she needed to hang her illusions. And when she finally stopped, waiting for some sign of forgiveness, I simply said, "There's nothing left to fix." Her face fell, her lips trembling as if she'd rehearsed another speech but lost the script. I walked away, leaving her standing in the lobby while strangers pretended not to stare. That moment wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was clarity. She wanted me to give her a bridge back, but I had already burned it the moment she mocked me as nothing more than a man who paid her bills. Her friend texted me later that evening. She said Lauren was spiraling, telling anyone who would listen that I had turned cold, that I wasn't the same man she married. But the irony was brutal. She was right. I wasn't the same man. I was stronger, sharper, untethered from the cage she tried to keep me in. Days passed, and the messages slowed. From her family, from the social circle that once circled around her smirk like moths to a flame. She had gone from adored to avoided, from confident to desperate, and I didn't lift a finger to make it happen. Instead, I invested in myself. New projects, new routines, new connections. Life was expanding again, and every step forward made the past feel smaller. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I didn't feel anything at all. And that was the true punishment. Not rage, not revenge, but indifference. Because when someone who once owned your world can no longer move a single part of you, they cease to exist. Lauren wanted a clean escape, a narrative where she could play the victim and I the villain. Instead, she was left with silence and the crushing weight of knowing she no longer mattered. The final time I saw her was not in my office, not on my doorstep, but by chance. I was at a restaurant with colleagues, laughing at something that had nothing to do with her, when she walked in. She spotted me immediately, and for a moment, her face lit up as if she believed fate had handed her another chance. She started toward me, but I didn't flinch. I kept my focus on the table, on the people who were part of my present, not my past. She lingered near, waiting for me to acknowledge her. When I finally turned my head, I looked right through her, like she was another stranger in a crowded room. The same way she once looked through me when her phone was more interesting than our marriage. Only now, the roles were reversed, and the silence between us wasn't temporary, it was permanent. She stood there for a few seconds, trying to muster a smile, before walking away, shoulders slumped. That was the moment it became real. Not just for her, but for me too. The chapter was closed. There would be no reconciliation, no dramatic showdown, no begging, and no forgiveness. Just an ending so sharp and quiet it echoed louder than any words could. In the weeks that followed, I heard pieces of her unraveling. Her new man had left her. Friends distanced themselves. Family grew tired of her half-truths. She had gambled with everything and lost, and now she was left with nothing but the echo of her own choices. As for me, I kept moving forward. I wasn't rebuilding. I was simply living. Stronger, smarter, detached from the weight that had once held me down. I wasn't the man she mocked in her living room, the one she called basically my ex, just pays the bills. I had become something colder, something sharper. A man who didn't raise his voice, didn't waste his breath, didn't beg. The truth is, the loudest revenge isn't rage. It isn't shouting or fighting or proving a point. It's the silence of walking away for good, leaving someone alone with the sound of their own mistakes. Lauren wanted control, power, freedom. What she got was emptiness. And I gave her exactly what she asked for, independence. The kind so absolute it left her standing alone, staring into the quiet. And that was the end. Not with a bang, not with a scream, but with 6 words that had sealed her fate from the very beginning. Benefits canceled. Get out. Now. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.